tonight and won't join us.
Okay.
There he is. Hi, Henry. Henry, don't sit down. Council, would you lead us to the salute to the flag?
That'll teach you to be late.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor Lippman. We are joined by the recording secretary, Katie, city manager, Scott Myers, and doing two jobs is Glenn Smith. Not only is the finance director, but he's doing the Zoom and everything else. Okay. The next thing on the agenda is the budget presentation by the Water Department. Ben?
Good evening. I know I said good morning to Mr. Felch earlier, but good evening. Ben Crawford, Superintendent of the Laconia Water Department. I think presented here, all of you except for Katie now for at least once, if not a couple times. So I won't go through the whole rigmarole again, but as you all know, we do work out of our own water rates as opposed to tax rates. We kind of work within our own limits, but we bring it here to present for you all to see what we're doing and what we've been up to for the last year and what we plan to do for the next year and how everything looks within the city and our ratepayers match up a lot with your taxpayers. Not everyone is on the water rates, but a lot of crossover there. So let's go through. I know last year I stood before you, it was right at kind of in the middle of COVID. I mean, I know we're still kind of going through that, but when we had the drought in the year of 2020 and everything, we actually had a very good closeout to the year that ended in June of 2020. We're now looking at the year that ended out in June of 21 as we're looking forward here. We did have another good year at the end of fiscal year going into 21. So we looked at all those numbers. We also try to plan our best as we can at about the 6-month turn of December numbers. That's when we kind of finalize our budget at the water board and see what we're looking at going forward there. So what we looked at a lot was just what our consumptions are doing, how our expenses are, how we're keeping up with, I want to say other utility companies, public sector, not private. We always try to compare how our people are doing to other public, not private, because those are two very separate things. So we always try to look at kind of how we compare up to others. And like I said, we had a pretty good year again last fiscal year. We've been doing okay this fiscal year going forward. We look month over month. I think we sent quarterly numbers to everyone here. So the last you all would have seen is the March numbers. So our 3-quarter numbers this year. And as of now, we are not planning a rate increase for this next fiscal year. So starting in July of 22, going into June of 23, we have a lot of the base work. I should say we have a lot of the base work done. We know it's going to take about 7 months from the point we say go to when we may actually start to see bills coming in with an increase on it. So it's not an immediate turnaround. So we're always trying to look at that future forecast of what are our consumptions doing and what are we seeing on our expenses, which, as you all know, have gone through the roof on many different fronts in the past 1.5 to 2 years. Some things that are just beyond our control, the fuels, the material shortage, and if you can get them, they're expensive. And of course, labor rates, trying to match up with that to retain employees. So like I said, we have not put into our budget this year a rate increase. We're trying to postpone that as long as we can, which Councilman Susi sits on our water board. He's seen every 2 weeks, we seem to have the ongoing discussion of what's it going to bring the next time, and we just keep that rolling forward. So what we've done in this budget, and I'll go through it just kind of, I won't go line by line, but section by section, is that we put in there to make our budget balanced and also to show a net income as opposed to a net loss, which we've actually shown in the past couple of years. I don't know if anybody recalls that. We actually put in there that we're going to take some money from our savings or our checking account back into our O&M budget to make things flow and make things come out even on the other side. Obviously, that's not a sustainable answer to this question of what are we going to do going forward, but it's a one-time, let's get it through there, try to postpone that increase a little longer, keep the ratepayers where they're at now, because they're facing the same things we are. They're facing higher electric bills and propane bills and oil bills, gas bills, everything. They're facing the same challenges we are. So if we can work within our parameters to keep that, where we're in a good standing, and not hemorrhaging money out the other side, that would work best for all. So that being said, we don't necessarily want to use that money if we don't have to. And a lot of our revenues are based on consumptions. It's how much water is going through the taps, how busy the restaurants are, the hotels are, how dry it is, are people watering their lawns, things like that. So we watch that again, month over month, and we'll end up looking at it probably closer to the end of the fiscal year here at the end of next month, which we'll get those numbers into July and August of where do we fall? Do we need to set that motion going forward of that 7-month turnaround of when we may see a rate increase? So let's preface that with that, because I know that's one of the biggest questions is, are the rates going to change? What are they going to change to? So with that said, if we do go with a rate increase, we've also talked a lot more about base rate versus consumption. Right now, we have a split rate. You pay a certain base rate no matter what you use for water, and you pay a consumption rate for how much water you use. You pay a certain amount for that. Where we look at the consumption, it's very variable. It depends on the seasonality of the weather. If you recall, we have a drought year. We could have a great year and pump all this water, sell all this water, things look great. We have a year where it just starts raining in April and doesn't seem to stop till September. We don't sell a lot of water because people aren't watering their lawns, which in the summertime can account to 25-30% of our revenues, depending on how dry it is. So we look at that, and if we're looking at a rate increase, we may work more towards the base rate. That's a known. We bring that rate up. We know what we'll get in return. We also know what we'll be charging to our customers. We can tell them what their increase will be. We may do a balancing act of a little bit on consumption, more on base, but that's yet to be seen. So that's kind of my general outlook. Again, I'll go through what's the city budget pages and just kind of show you the big ticket items. So I don't know if anybody has their book, or I can just go right through them, but I went off the city budget book. So I start on page 115 is the summary page. And then I actually jump to 126 is where the water starts, because it's the summaries are both the sanitary, sewer, and water, and then we jump ahead to the water. So the big ticket items on our water budget, our total operating expenses, or our total expenses in general, are going up about 3%. Most of that is due to things we have to do. We know our chemical costs have gone up. We know our material costs have gone up. We know our heating bills, our power, everything has gone up a little bit. So we bring those up, and that's what we're seeing as we go month, this March versus last month or last March. We see that everything's going up about 3%. So we're holding that steady as we're moving forward. We're just under 3% there. Our income is actually shown going up about 2%, backing out the 250,000. I'll go into what we brought over from our savings. I'll show that later. If you take that back out of the equation, our expenses are going up about 2%. So if you look at 3% up on expenses, 2% on income, at some point along those lines are going to cross, and we're going to need an increase. We're just trying to find out when that point is. So what I'll do is I'll go on to, if anyone wants to follow along in the books, page 126 is where I am now. And this is on our revenues, our water billing, residential and commercial. That's our big ticket item. We have just over 3 million, or right around 3 million is our total revenues for the year. About 2.5 of that is in water billing, residential and commercial. So those are 99% of the consumers around here. Subtract out the municipal. And that's going up about 1.2%, just about $30,000. So in all, looking at it, big spectrum, that's about level funded. We're going up 1%, but $30,000 on 2.5 million is not a large increase there. We're seeing a little bit, mainly due to the increase in units. With all the construction we've seen going around, we know we're getting some more units in, and those are, again, known costs. We don't look at the consumption so much because that's such an unknown. And our total revenues overall are going up just about 40,000. We did have a couple other smaller things going up, but the funds transferred from savings on the second half says additional income is about halfway down. You'll see over on the far right in this budget request, we have 250,000. So that's taking from our savings account or checking account. However, it's technically a checking account. We use it as a savings account because of the interest rates right now. We haven't really looked into savings accounts. That's if we need it, we can pull that 250,000 back into our O&M, which gives us, again, it gives us a net income as opposed to a net loss. It gives us the availability for more capital projects, and it can potentially postpone that increase by using some of the funds in our bank accounts. And we've talked about this again at length at the board meetings. We don't want to go down too low on what we have in our reserves for obvious reasons. Something breaks, we have a big project that comes up, or Public Works has a road they want to do. We need to hop in and get the water done. We don't want to keep bonding projects and keep pushing these debts down the road. We want to get them done, but we also want to be able to work with the ratepayers here as well. So we're looking to keep about 6 months of operating expenses in our bank accounts at all time, with the capital reserve fund as a separate, that's a, you know, if something comes up and we need to do it, we have that cash to put right in there. We want to keep about 6 months of our operating expenses in our checking account, so that if something did go completely sideways and we need to just maintain and get through, we have it there. Now, 6 months is about 1 million to 1.2 is what our 6 month operating expense would be. Right now, we're around, at, I'll say this, Bob and I, we explain this every meeting. We've got the Court Street Bridge project, which is through the state, which I know some of you may have heard with the reimbursement there. We actually foot the bill for that. They reimburse it. So right now we're around 900,000 in our checking account. We just wrote a check for 300,000 to the state, hoping some of that comes back to 250,000 of that. So we're in that range right now, that 1 to 1.2 where we want to be. We want to maintain with that. And if need be, you know, if we have a good year, we can postpone that, or we pull some over and keep in that $1 million range. That's our big picture there. We just want to keep as much as we can in-house, because like I said, everyone's facing the same expenses we are. Sewer had an increase the past 3 years, not this year, but the previous 3 years. Solid waste just had an increase, or they're going through an increase. So we're trying to kind of offset them rather than hit everyone with all these expenses right at once. I was going to go into expenses just a little bit. If anyone had any questions on revenues before I go down the expense road. And again, I think the last couple of years I may have bored people as I sat up here and ran through every line. So I'll just hit the big items this time.
So I guess
Yeah.
just on the rate changes, what
Yes.
was the last time we had a rate increase and how much was it?
Yep. Last time it went into effect was November of 2018. And that was so our base rate at the time was $20. It went to $21. So, and then we went from 185 to 235. So 50 cents on the consumption. And that's 50 cents on every 748 gallons used. So percentage wise, if we look at it, we actually have some of the lower rates in the state. So our percentages are high. We're not getting the return on them because you put a 10% increase on our lower rates, maybe less than someone with a higher rate at 3%. But we try not to look at the percentages. We've looked at that, and say if we do a 3% increase, we're actually not going to net that much. But that was 2018. Before that, there was 15. So we'd been going about 3 years for a little while. And we looked at it in 2020, 21, and we didn't see the need for one because we had the drought year with COVID, and we were actually pushing out a lot of irrigation water. We had no need for an increase. So we postponed that. That was a no-brainer. Now we're starting to see that decline a little bit on the consumption. We're looking there. So if we put something into effect now where it's going to be 6 to 7 months, we would be into 2023. We'd be closing in on 4.5, 5 years.
I guess, a little bit all the time is better than a lot at
Exactly.
once. I guess,
That's exactly the feeling of the board is a little bit, excuse me, that's exactly the feeling of the board, a little bit this year, maybe next year, instead of all at once.
and then I guess in terms of the 48 million odd construction that's being brought on, do you have any estimates of what that is going to do to consumption?
So again, the consumption is a tough one to look at. We look at the unit charges. Again, that's a known, where we've been gaining about 70 units a year, and there we get 21 a quarter. So $20 a quarter, $80 a year. You figure that over 70 units. It's a good chunk of change. It's not going to keep going forever that way. I'm sure eventually the housing market will have a little crash there, and we'll lose some of that, but we have seen some income increase on that from the unit charges. The consumption is, again, it's very variable for many reasons. One of which, take the Barton's Motel, for example, is a lot of units there. Obviously older fixtures, things like that may have only been occupied part of the year. These new units that are going up, they're putting in low flow washing machines and dishwashers and toilets, things like that. So we may be getting these newer, nice units, which have, again, great revenues for the tax side with the building permits. But we don't always see that on the water. And again, they're coming in. We don't know when that's actually going to start hitting. We do see the increase in units though, which is great because that's a known, you know how many units are going in. They send you the plans with how many bathrooms are going to be there. So we can factor off of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, so expense wise, I'll go right in. Just I'll hit on the big ticket items. If anyone has any questions as we go through them, I'll give the page number, the big items. If anyone wants to stop me before I go to the next page, feel free to. That way we don't have to go right back, or if you want to get at the end, that's fine too. So our salaries was one of the bigger expenses here. We factored in, again, at the time in December when we were looking at it, we factored in a 3% cost of living, not knowing exactly what the city may end up with and also what inflation may do. Again, we try to mirror closely to what the city does. And I think about a 2.5 is what we're looking at now. So we're in that same ballpark, whether we end up with the same. And there's been talk of step changes, maybe adding a step or two at the end of the max step. So we factor in a 3%. We have the leeway if we need to go with a 2.5, maybe change a little classification there. And then I'll go right down. So our production expense, so I'm on page 127. Sorry, I didn't start with that. Our production expenses, these are all the expenses associated with making the water, everything from pumping it right from Pogus Bay up to the treatment plant, all of our different stations and tanks out in the city. And those actually went down slightly according to the budget. And that's because we've actually been coming in well under on that. And that was another big discussion we had is we a lot of times show a large negative when we're looking at our budget. We show a large loss and then we end up a couple $100,000 to the good. So we've been having a $400,000 or $500,000 gap in there. So we're trying to tighten everything up. So even though our expenses may have gone up in the budget, it's shown as going down because we were so far under the last year. So we're trying to kind of tighten things up to make it a little neater there. On there though, again, it went down slightly. It was about 1%, $5,000, nothing major there. All right. Any questions on the production or page 127 at all? All right. So 128's got a few different categories. We have our distribution expenses. That covers a wide range of things. Majority of it is our hydrants, our services, water main breaks, the pavement that goes along with that, all the parts. Again, a lot of unknowns there. We don't know what's going to happen in the winter or the summer for that matter. We don't know what's going to break, and we try to base that off our historical average as best we can. Again, we brought that one down actually about 1.5%, $1,500, small dollar amount, but again, trying to get a little tighter on our expenses as we budget them. Our billing expenses was one of the few that actually went up. Again, that's just, we know postage is going up, it's going up again. So it's small dollar amount. It's about $500, but percentage wise went up. And the third category on that page is our other expenses. Big one here you'll look at is medical insurance. We actually dropped that about $19,000, and that's, I'll just go through that and then I'll get to you both gentlemen. We brought that down because what we do is we always historically tried to factor in if somebody's a single person, they may go to a 2-person or a family plan, depending on if they get married. If they were a buyout, we factor them in as a single person or 2-person. This year, we had a lot of knowns. We knew people were staying. So we actually had somebody that was a 2-person. They went to a buyout. So that dropped that down. That was about $15,000 right there. And I had a 2-person that went to a single person. So we were very close there. And we had a 5.6% not to exceed, which is what we put in there as our increase on the other side. Yes.
In terms of billing, have you looked at doing electronic statements, and how far away are you from doing that?
We've looked into it because there is a large cost savings there. Once you get rolling, there's obviously the capital to start it and get into it. Certainly, I think we're behind the times on that. I'll agree with you on that if that's what you were hinting at. We do need to get to that. It's just a matter of how we can do it, both with having a credit card availability at the office or someone calling in to say, I want to do it, or just being online and paying their bill, doing it that way. The cost of postage is going, it's 60 cents a stamp is not a lot when you look at it, but when you're sending out 6,000 bills every quarter, it's quite a bit. So yeah, we have looked at that. That's getting closer to the top of the list. I won't say that we've done it yet, but it's certainly moving up.
Have you looked at like as opposed to doing it in-house, but doing it through a service?
Have not up to this point. We have not.
Maybe
The item that's on our agenda, in fact, we talked about last week, was specifically trying to mimic, right, where like we're doing at City Hall for registrations, auto registrations and those kinds of things, do that kind of stuff, something like that, along that line, but get rid of the postage.
Did you have one as well or no?
I'm all set. Thanks,
Okay,
man.
yep. All right, so that was insurance. Other than that, we actually, it was $700 on the total of other expenses. We actually did go down a little bit. Some things went up to offset the insurance cost. So on to page 129, we're looking at our other charges, which again is kind of a broad category, just how we put it in there. Depreciation, that's again factored off of everything we have, pipes in the ground, buildings, equipment. That's a known as we move forward. The next one down, interest on bonds. You'll actually see that went, sorry, it did not go down, but we had it lower than what we thought. It did go down. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. It went down about $12,000 from the previous year. And that was because we'd factored the previous year on a $1.8 million bond for the Lakeport project, which was Clinton, Prospect, that whole area, everything up to the tank. We ended up coming in under budget on that. We made a $400,000 reduction payment on the principal reduction on our bond. So it actually brought the interest payments down, which was, we did that for a number of reasons. One, obviously to bring the interest down. We used some of that money to pay for other streets. So we were able to shift things around to kind of match the public works this spring. We're over on Addison Street now, which I know certainly Mark Haynes knows, but I'm sure the rest of you know as well. You've seen us up there a little bit. So that's where we ended up with that. So our total other expenses actually went up slightly. Again, that's depreciation, means that goes up almost $30,000. And then the next two down, they don't really have their own header, but the less labor capital improvement and less labor capital reserve projects. This is one that we've talked about for years. I know Seth talked about it, probably closing in on 5 years ago now, that we always tried to factor in how much money we're going to use towards capital projects, back that out of our budget so that it matches up. We've been trying to slowly get rid of that by our own look at it, and also talking to Pat and Melanson and Heath. Pat, blanking on his name now, but Pat, who used to work for Melanson and Heath and the new Jen that's working there now. By their recommendation too, we just want to get that out of there. So we're not relying on an unknown as far as how much labor we have. Because we'd seen it for some years. We'd been over $100,000. We were thinking we were going to back out towards our capital labor, and we'd ended up with $20,000. So all of a sudden you're in an $80,000 hole at the end of the year trying to figure out where you're going to cut expenses or bring more money in. So we've this year have brought that completely out of there. As far as budgeting purposes, it will still come out as we go, but we're not relying on that. So our total expenses, as they're shown here, we're about 3% up, 2.94%. If you took that capital labor that I just mentioned out of there, we're about 2% on our operating expenses up over the year. Again, where we tried to tighten that up and say, okay, we're not going to spend as much as we had previously shown. We only came to a 2% increase. I'm sure our actual, I'm not sure, but my best guess is our actuals will be more than 2% than what they were in this current year. But as we're showing them, we're looking at about a 2% increase in total expenses. And the last number at the bottom, the balance capital improvement fund, that's showing what we have in our capital budget, what we're actually going to spend out of our capital budget. That's what would be left to put back into our capital reserve at the end of the year. I'm going to go on to the capital budget on next in my packet, but it's actually 140 on your page. And I'll explain how we've looked at some deferments. Oh, yeah.
Just one question, Ben, on page 129.
Yes.
The negative 214,651.
Last year's net income and loss. Yes, so that's what we were showing last year. Again, where I'm saying that we're trying to neaten that up a little, because we're showing these large net losses. We came in at, we were almost $400,000 to the black last year. So almost a $600,000 discrepancy from what you show to what you come up with. Again, there's some unknowns with the consumption, but we don't want to have a $500,000 gap in there every year. So we're trying to get that a little closer and say, okay, where are we actually falling? This does have, so just to back up, if you had that 250,000 from the first page that we put in from our savings account, you put that in here, if you took that away, we would be about $250,000 to the red. And that's because that's factoring into our net income and loss. So that's showing as income. So if you back that out of the 3252 in this year, we would be 250,000 in the red. That's due to our expenses continuing to go up and the revenue not matching them.
Gotcha.
Again, last year we showed that. We showed it for, I think, Seth mentioned it to you when we sat down a couple of times, and I think I've shown every year I've been here a number in the red. We've never gotten to that point, thankfully. But again, we're just trying to be less conservative on our budget, where we've always been a little over conservative, if you will.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
a lot of that's being done in conjunction with the auditors. They're making the recommendations how we clean this up.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll go on to capital and I'll start that out with, so this is on page 140, anyone in the book. We put our capital budget together, again, at the Board of Commissioners, we're looking at, are there any purchases or projects that we could postpone or defer for a year or two, just to not spend the money if we don't need to. We have it there, doesn't necessarily mean that we need to have it. We have $708,000 in our capital budget. That doesn't mean that we need to go out there and spend $708,000. If we can do it for 500 or 600, let's do that and keep another $100,000 or $200,000 in the bank for those unknowns down the road. So I'll go through the purchases. Again, a lot of these stay year over year. So the first 5 actually stay year over year. The dollar amounts change a little bit. And those are just things that may come up. We have many pumps and motors around the different stations. The distribution upgrades is all of our gates and hydrants. We've got meters and meter reading, which is for meters, and the MXUs, the readers that go on there. Computers and software, especially this day and age, something comes up, you got to buy a new computer, a new software on it. And then also the SCADA upgrades, again, where we've backed out that global care, which I think I mentioned, now just throw it out there. It's the 3rd year in a row I've mentioned it. We took out the global care program of our insurance on the SCADA program, and we're doing our own upgrades in-house. We're purchasing parts and just kind of upgrading as we go, rather than spend thousands of dollars for something that we may not end up using. But then as we get down to starting at the Weirs Pump Station building rehab, these are all ones that are in for this year only. So the Weirs Pump Station, that's the one up on the Weirs Boulevard. There's 2 stations. We have a little brick pump station, and the sewer has one. The roof on that's failing, the fascia on it. So we put in some money in there to do a whole new roof on there. And also, just by design fault, there's no access point on the roof to pull the pumps up and out if we ever needed to. So we're looking at doing hatches on the roof, things like that. Treatment plant truck. This is one, so it's $45,000. We put that in there. It's just a general duty truck that would also get us into some confined space areas with a boom on the back for like a man lift. That's one we looked at deferring. It's got 70,000 miles on it. It is 10 or 12 years old, but it's in great shape. So that's one that we're going to look at, come March or April of next year. Do we have the need for it? Do we want to look at it? We're not going to pull the trigger on that July 1 this year. Union Avenue building repairs. These are our buildings down at, we call it base, the one on Union Avenue right by Irwin Marine. We have 3 brick buildings there that have some serious brickwork to be done. We put $100,000 in there just as we're exactly sure what it would be. We've talked about it. We'll just go as we go. We'll probably do end up a request for qualification to RFQ just to get out there and see who can do it. We'll just kind of piecemeal as we go and keep them going until we get to a point where we feel like we're comfortable or we have more money to keep going. But again, that's one that we can back down if we need to. Security upgrades was majority of that's going to cameras, motion detectors, things like that, just physical security around our different stations. Treatment plant garage door replacement is one of the large doors up at our plant. Again, has not failed. We had one that failed, but we may defer that until we actually need to do it rather than be proactive on it. Clarifier rehab is just something at the plant. Again, I won't get too technical, but it's basically just cleaning up our treatment trains and cleaning everything up, getting it ready to go again. We did put in here a rate study for $25,000, and that is to look at not so much dollar amount of what we need to do and when we need to do it, but just our structure in general. As I mentioned, we have a base and consumption structure. There's all kinds of different structures around the city, around the country around the state, around the country, that they may do just a base rate, or they may do just a consumption rate, or just you have a meter, you pay this is what you pay. Or if you use more water, you spend less, or if you use more water, you spend more. There's oodles of different variables out there and different ways to do it. So that's one look, to have someone come in and look at that and how could we make it work better for us and also for the ratepayers, taxpayers in this case. Long Bay tank mixer. We do have a standpipe tank over in Long Bay, South Down. It's a large elevated tank, dark colors on it, sits in the sun all day. So we're looking at maybe getting a mixer in there, just turn that water over. It keeps all the chlorine residual the same throughout the tank, the temperature of everything out throughout the tank. We did one over in Briarcrest a few years back. It's been working out great. And then the last one I'll mention is the furnaces at base. This is in 2 of our garages. So we just keep them heated through the winters, keep the trucks in a heated space. One's 32 years old, one's 40 years old. So we looked at replacing them. And we actually did get a grant from the state to cover the removal of the tanks and the old furnaces. We would go to natural gas, which runs through the site now. So I'm gonna play the best of both worlds, get a little bit from them to help remove the tanks, and we'll get some new natural gas furnaces in there. And then our 3 projects, Summer Street Relay, so that's a 6-inch water main from 1935, so closing in on 100 years old. Public Works has talked about doing a shim and overlay on that road, so the waterworks in-house would go in, replace that pipe. They would come and do the road after the fact. Franklin Street, similar to that. We did half of it last year, so we did from Washington to Fairmont, if anybody recalls, around the corner there. Continue from Fairmont to School, Chapin Terrace, that intersection there. So that'll be in this year. That'll be in this fall. So in this budget year, starting July 1st. And then Bowman Street, depending on what the city ends up doing as far as pavement treatment on that, we may defer that cost to further down the road. That's again one that we looked at. Maybe we can push that out. If they end up tearing the whole road up, we'll of course take care of the pipes. But if it's just a quick little shim, we'll probably leave that and carry that $20,000 within our capital for future. Yes.
Don't see the billing system as on your list of capital projects.
It's not. So again, it's kind of come up at it back in December when we were looking at this. It was not on the forefront yet. It certainly has. And that's something we've done a lot of times, not necessarily with a billing system, but if we have something that comes up, again, where we have $708,000 in there, we may not spend all of it. We'll do something else for $20,000 or $30,000 and just make sure we're not spending it elsewhere. So we never go over we try not to go over our capital budget. We just may shift the funds around. So that's something that if it comes up and we get somebody in here and we outsource it and they say, here's your bill for $35,000, we'll look at this and say, okay, maybe we can push that Union Avenue rehab and only do 50 here and keep a little bit for this. So that's something that could certainly come up.
I just
Yep.
think we can do some efficiency there and I mean, your bills are fine. It's just it's a lot of paper and a lot of postage and only
It
going to
is.
get more.
And I've heard not so great reviews about the envelope. I don't know if anybody
It's,
has any issues with that.
it's not that bad. All in all, you do a great job and
Thank you.
great water at a great price. So thank you.
I have a couple of things. Ben, number one, yes, fantastic. It's great. And, as part of the Water Commission, I can tell you do a commendable job. Thank you for the sure. And there's things in here that we've discussed as a commission.
Mhm.
We know we're going to take down and move off to another year or something. But
right.
regardless of that, what I'd like to know, or maybe the council would be interested in knowing, where do we stand as a city as far as on what we charge our ratepayers? And if you look at the number of cities in New Hampshire, where are we in that level?
Sure. So there hasn't been a full study done. There was a very in-depth one done in 2016, I believe. So they looked at it when they did the 2018 rate increase. And we were, I believe it was 12th in the state at that time. That's out of 100 something. It doesn't have every little town, but it's most of the larger ones. We were 12th. We were in the lowest quarter. We did a rate increase since then, but then again, I'm sure many of those other ones have done as well. So we're still in I would say, lowest 20% in the state as far as water rates. Again, we do bill water and sewer out of our office. So we get we get a little pushback there. Again, sewer is not necessarily, it's higher than water. I won't say it's one of the highest in the state. I think they're still in the lower half. I don't know as much about that, but we do have a fairly good rate for what we're able to provide.
And from my seat, I love it that they bill out the sewer because if there's complaints about the bill going up, they just call the water department because that's who it came from, even though sewer is 3/4 of most people's bills. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course.
And one more thing, it's come up in front of the council over the last few weeks. The milfoil situation, for example, Pogus Bay,
Yep.
things like that. And I know we've talked about it internally, but I like just to let the council know.
Sure. So as, a lot of you know, I believe the city provides some money into it and there's state grants, all kinds of different contributors to that. What we do as water department, we put in our recommendations of where we think they should treat and how much and when. So we kind of keep an eye on, we don't necessarily have a say of we can't go out there and tell them, no, you can't do this, or yes, you can do that. We go out there, we look at the map that they have and how many different areas we have. And we've worked with DES to draw lines basically along the bay of how far they can come down. Each year over year, they get a little bit closer and we have them test as they go. So we know how fast that Procellicor is dissipating in the water, the chemical they use on the milfoil. And they'll go out and test to see how quickly it does dissipate. They test at the site, they usually test anywhere from 1 to 3 spaces or sites in between where they've treated and our intakes. They test at our intakes, they test raw water at the plant, they test finished water at the plant. So they've been very helpful with that. They're always very involved. They come out and work with us. But again, the other one is just when they do it, because they usually do a June and a late August, early September treatment. We'll try to space them out rather than have two areas right next to each other at the same time and have all of that start to flow. We do maybe one up in the northern section, one down below our intakes, and vice versa in the fall season. And they've been,
And we can do what's referred to as dash milfoil treatment, diver assisted suction harvesting. So if you're too close to the intake, you don't have to go the chemical route. You can do that. It's just a little bit more labor intensive and more expensive in terms of the volume that you can treat. But we certainly do work with Ben and his team to put water quality, safety, and all that at the forefront of any of our decisions.
And then. okay,
Go right ahead.
Go ahead, Bob.
Then one more thing, I know it's come up to us as a council. A couple of things is that the residents up in Turnaway and the northern end of the city are looking for water. And they've come to the water department a couple of times, and Councilor Cheney and myself, along with Ben, have been looking at those kinds of things. And I think, so you'll know, the last number I think we put together is roughly $6 million is what it would take to bring water into that section. So all of those things are on the plate, and Ben and the Water Commission really trying to do a good job in all those areas. Thank you.
Just quickly, if you want to know how your neighbors feel about the city and about the water department, you only have to listen to them, and they've been extremely complimentary, really professional, and everyone has been really pleased.
I'm good. Glad to hear that.
Thank you.
It's a small little neighborhood up there, especially where you are, that a lot of disruption up there, but glad to hear that.
And there's been more traffic than you, I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know where the traffic comes from, but
Yeah.
Ben, I'm going to throw you a curveball here. Every time I go to a water dispenser here in City Hall, and I think we're paying a vendor for
October
water.
1st. Yes.
What's that?
Yes, October 1st, we're gonna be changing that.
Did I miss that earlier?
Yeah, no, once Scott's out of here, we're gonna get.
Oh, okay.
Wow, now he throws me under the bus right back. You see that?
No, but
Wow.
in all honesty, we have great water here. The idea that we're spending money on a water vendor, I'm sure it's not a lot of money.
Mhm.
But the idea that we're filling it up and someone's coming in here, when we have great water. Now, there are probably people who don't want to take it out of the tap in the lavatories, and I can understand that.
Yep.
But could you ever foresee a day when the water department, have the ability to bottle it in tanks like that and provide it to city offices and obviously charge for it? But
Yep.
it's just sort of odd. We have our own water department here. We've got a great water source. We have high quality water, yet we are filling up from another vendor.
That's another one. Again, it's a great question. It has come up. Not so much in the, I don't want to say bulk, but so we looked at it as a bulk water supplier. People that are coming to fill up their pools, or maybe they need to fill up their water trucks to go work on a job somewhere, things like that. We haven't looked necessarily as a smaller bottle like this, but I had reached out to Nestle, which I believe is Coca-Cola. They're all in the same chain there. And we reached out to a few of them just to see what that would entail. And I reached out to the state because they have a bulk water division. So you have to be certified for that, which I'm sure we would have no issue with the water. It's just a matter of what the dispensing at the plant would be. We'd have to have some type of standpipe or something like that. So we have looked into that. As far as looking into like a 5 gallon, we hadn't gone that far, but it's kind of all in the same idea as we were looking at exploring other avenues of revenue. I'll put it that way, I guess.
Well, I would encourage you to come back at some point, maybe just by chance, if you have any additional information to share with us. Maybe it's post October 1st. I don't know. Whatever it is, though, I just think it's we should be doing our part within the city here, even though it's a small amount of water. But the fact is, I think we should be, using our own water here.
Understandable. Yeah. And the optics of it. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
You may, in fact, have raised this initially years ago when I was on the water.
No, this
commission.
was in the past, 8 months, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But someone mentioned it just a few years ago when
Yep.
I was on the water commission.
Yep.
So, and I've thought about it every time I've gone to the water coolers now. But anyway, that's the curveball for tonight. I have nothing else. Thank you. for
Thank
doing a
you.
great
For
job.
the retail
At the
business.
price of water, there might be a lot of people beyond the city who would be interested in 5 gallons of water. Might give that some thought. If I may,
Please do.
I just want to reinforce Ben, what Counselor Susie said. I know $6 million a big nut, but I hope that you and the board put some time and effort in and planning into perhaps segmenting that build out. The northwestern part of the city is the largest area of undeveloped land in the city. And at the moment, we can only do 2-acre lots because of septic and water.
Okay, yep.
So, you might be able to help us get additional housing, for you, additional revenues at some point. But again, I just want to reinforce Counselor Susie's comment that we have citizens who are asking, when can we expect some relief and some of that good water? I hope we can, this time next year, be talking about at least what's in a plan and perhaps a segmented plan for heading in that direction. May not be able to do it all at once, although there may be grants that could help with that. And I'd like to, and I suspect others would like to see that coming up in the future. Thanks.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you very much.
Take a bottled water.
Go ahead, you can continue on. Go ahead. Oh, okay, that's fine. Next presentation is going to be the library, and Randy and John Moriarty, Randy Bro.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, councilors.
Use the microphone.
Sure. John Moriarty, Chairman of the Library Board of Trustees. Thank you for your time tonight. Randy Bro, Library Director, here to make our presentation. I'm just curious, is this the last time I'm likely to present while you're sitting at that table?
Yes.
It is. Well, I just want to say thank you for all the great work you've done. And I know that you were seeking input on what the next city manager and what qualities we're looking for. And the only answer that I could come up to that is exactly clone what you already have. And from my perspective, both inside and outside the library, Mr. Myers has been a terrific city manager. And I was trying to think of anything that I ever thought you were in the wrong, and I couldn't come up with any, but I came up with two where I was clearly in the wrong. And Mr. Myers handled them with a great deal of decorum and in consideration. So, you always think of the good times, but in the one or two rough times, Mr. Myers, I really salute the work that you do. So thank you for that, and good luck to all of you. So the library has, I just want to kind of go back a couple of years. I know I've said this last year during the budget presentation, that there are 243 public libraries in the state of New Hampshire, and that on March 6th or whatever that date was, that we all made the decision about COVID, that Laconia Public Library was one of two that remained operational. We did close the physical building, we did a takeout service, but Randy and his staff did a fantastic job and kept our patrons safe by giving them something to do to engage them. We did not see our circulation numbers waver, which was really nice. We did see our program numbers, obviously, when we were physically closed. We did see our program numbers essentially go to near zero, other than the online component. It's interesting that we haven't not fully bounced back from that until about November of last year. It's easy now, I think, to maybe lose track of what exactly the last 6 or 8 months have looked like. But I'm pleased to report that from an attendance standpoint of programs, our numbers are not only sharply up, but they are up fiscal year to date from where they were, and they are up the same period from 2 years ago, so pre-COVID. So there seems to be a resurgence. People have not forgotten about the public library and the resources that we have to offer. And Randy and his staff are doing a great job of responding to that, changing what the programming would be, and making adjustments. So, much as we see the interest in the Colonial Theater and all the interest that Laconia seems to be attracting statewide, New England wide. I think it's safe to say that Laconia Library is also part of that cultural renaissance here in the city, and that we are poised to continue to do our part to make citizens, new citizens and old citizens alike, feel at home and comfortable, and to stretch their minds and support what it is that they need intellectually. So I don't think there are any surprises in our budget. Obviously, Mr. Myers has a couple of recommendations there, and I think we can live with all of them. Some things we did, we deliberately, as a board, gave Randy very specific instructions, while some of the COVID question marks about exactly what this would look like in terms of taxpayers, et cetera, to defer anything that could be deferred, and he has done that. And so as you look down those columns, I think you can sort of see where those decisions were made. But we're looking forward to be back in full operation. We are now. So I'm looking forward to those numbers, the dollars and cents reflecting that. And I think that's more or less the conversation that you expect year after year. The one thing that I have been asked by the trustees to talk briefly about, and they did formalize this in a motion. So I kind of wish that I had some latitude here, but I don't. But following the conversations we had during the interview process, when I was reappointed, one of the concerns continues to be the experience that patrons have coming to the library, particularly during the colder seasons of the year. We're trying to manage the people who are legitimately there to use the library for what its intended goal is. From time to time, there are other people who are using it for its plumbing and for its heat. And so the staff is doing a very nice job of walking that tightrope as to exactly what the mission of the library is. It's not a shelter. But at any rate, one of the things that the trustees have instructed me to do is to ask you to amend our budget to include $30,000 for a part-time security guard November through March. I know that some conversations are going to take place with the police chief. I have run into him about town a couple of times. And I think we're all in agreement that the library doesn't know the first thing about law enforcement, and we should not go down that road. There are trained professionals who know how to do that much better than we do. But as I say, I was asked to make that presentation. And so unless there are any questions about that, I think we'll turn the page and move on. So I think that probably sums up.
I do have a question.
John, excuse me, Councilman Lippman.
I understand the concern you're raising, but in terms of before we would consider something like that, I think we need to understand so the city doesn't put itself in a litigation position in terms of rights and what constitutes behavior that you can deal with. So I guess before we would consider it, I would hope that we would have some parameters set up to consider that.
You might find it helpful to know just a couple of metrics along the way. Laconia Police Department, and I guess I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but we did ask Chief Canfield to look at some of his responses. And since I can't exactly remember the date, I'm going to say it was January 1st through, well, it was just shy of a year. It's 76 responses to the library. And likewise, the fire department had 11 responses for medical responses. Of course, we don't know what those are, but I don't know what those are. Probably the people who are there do, but I think we can assume that an overdose is not in keeping with the legal mission of the library. The gray area that you're talking about, and I can strongly defer to the professional staff on this, but loitering in the day of smartphones, if you're connected to our Wi-Fi, you are no longer loitering. You're there using the library for its legitimate purpose. That's where the gray areas definitely do come in. And there is some concern about how we navigate those waters. And that's just one example. There are obviously several others. Should I add anything to that?
No, I think you explained it well.
Did I, well, obviously we're speaking the same language here, I think, Counselor. Is that
I have some concerns about how this is approached in terms of exposing the city to liability. I mean, it's not a shelter. I understand that a patron who's not acting with respect and decorum, that's a different set of issues, but just because someone uses the facilities or isn't on a smartphone doesn't make them a loiterer.
Agreed. And we're all well aware of the Supreme Court cases that have tested some of that. I think maybe one of the most famous ones was Michigan, I forget where it was asked to leave the library because they had an offensive odor. New Jersey, thank you. And that's clearly unconstitutional and illegal. And we know better than that. We really do. But your point is very well taken. We're always open to counsel.
Counselor Cheney, did you have something you
Well,
want?
yes, thank you.
Then I'll get to
I,
you, Counselor Susie.
excuse me, as a result of some of the conversation we had in his interview for reappointment, as a result of that, I had conversations with the chief. As it happens, I'm meeting with him tomorrow to go over some things, including this. I think, Councilor Lippman, that there may be a way that we can have professional police officers do that work. And perhaps the 30,000 we're talking about can be used if that's necessary, and I'm not even sure it is at this point, to offset any additional costs that the police department might have. But the police department's ability to recognize the rights of citizens is, despite thoughts around the country, is fairly educated. And I think they can do what needs to be done at the library. And certainly the citizens have a right to quiet enjoyment at the library or other places in the city. And walking the fine line between what's constitutionally permitted and what's not is one that the police department deals with every day of the week. So I'm hoping they can solve some of the issues that were raised at our meeting. And if I can just as an aside say, I think Councilor Susie's idea of a committee to interview folks, when we met with the library, which should have been a 5-minute interview, it was an hour or more. And we learned a lot of very interesting and gave me ammunition to talk with the police chief and start to look at what the library's needs might be going forward. So I just want to say, I think the idea of the interviews worked out better than I had anticipated. And I look forward to helping them solve their problems with just short of loitering.
Thank you, Counselor Cheney. Counselor Susie, and then Counselor Lippman.
Okay, to expand about what Councilor Cheney had to say, I'd be strongly in favor of finding a way that the police department could have a person there or part of the regular duty. Haven't spent many years working that downtown beat. If you want to put it that way, I can see that happening, especially during the day. And if you took the $30,000, or even if it was more, whatever it amounts to, whatever the Councilor Cheney and chief can think about, I think that'd be a better way. And I think it'd be strongly supported by the citizen and be really happy and enjoyed by the citizens. The other question I had in this, and this might have already been addressed by the city manager, okay? And I know all of us here at the table and in the audience are feeling this. I see you've got basically the same amount of money for your fuel for this coming year. How are you going to take care of what I was told today is $6.50 a gallon for fuel oil? I'm not sure if you're on gas or not, but I assume
Natural gas.
so. It's not rising as much as it is in the oil side.
I don't think so, but it's still rising pretty significantly. And we put this together like back in October.
Okay. It's the only number on there that I saw. along with, that's, that I was really just questioning, okay, and we probably have to come back or either that, finding some other monies in your budget or
But to
different
lower the
appropriation.
thermostat.
Mhm.
That may help with this other problem.
Thank you.
Okay, Council Levin.
I guess I'd like us to take a step back before we spend $30,000 on pushing people out as to whether there's $30,000 that could be invested to deal with the fundamental problem, because all you're doing is moving the problem to another part of the city.
No, I agree. They have found a place. Anyone else?
They're gonna find another place,
Oh, I know.
and then we're gonna need to do it in two places. So
Yeah.
I think we ought to be thinking about a different strategy here.
John, you could continue. if you want.
Thank you. I think in the interest of your time, I think we're pretty much at the end of our presentation. The one thing that I'd like to bring full circle while we're talking about farewells is I think for the last 21 years, as we've made these presentations to you, standing beside us has been our library director, Randy Bro, and this will be his final presentation to you. We're in the midst of a search which has gone very well. There'll be some big announcements in the future. But I'd just like to personally acknowledge to Randy the gratitude we have for the great job he has done stewarding our public library. And I know that many of our patrons have expressed the same concern. And so I just wanted to say that publicly in front of you. So Randy, thank you for all you have done for our libraries.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there any other business that anyone wants to bring up? The hour is 6:58. Okay, the budget meeting is adjourned.